Right. Good morning, everybody. I want to welcome you to our third regional highlight field day for our farms program of the year. And today we are going to be talking with Sierra Pacific Industries and have a panelist of professionals that work for them who are going to share about their careers and what they have to offer and what they do. So I'm going to introduce myself and have all of our farms team introduce themselves. I'm Dana Baker, the Tehama County and North State Region Farms Coordinator, and I live in Red Bluff, so that's where I'm coming to you today from. Katie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'll play with this fun camera here. Is this fun?
Katie, we actually have a KD, and I'm gonna have, you're good. So Katie's down in our Central Valley, so I'm gonna have her introduce herself first.
Take it away, KD.
Hi, sorry. So yes, my name is Katie Geist. I live in Madera, and I'm one of the coordinators for the Central Valley. So from Tulare, Kings County, all the way up to Madera County and up into like La Grande.
Letty.
Hi, everyone. I'm Letty Hernandez, and I run the farms program on the Central Coast. So I'm in Monterey and Santa Cruz County.
Great, and Romy.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Romy Wattenbarger. I'm here in Bakersfield, and I take care of all the Kern County region for the farms program.
All right, thank you, guys. All right, KT, I'm going to turn it over to you. Katie Luther, she works for Sierra Pacific Industries, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about herself and what she does for them. She kind of has a cool niche position, I feel like. So take it away.
Well, hi, guys. I'm Katie Luther. I work here for Sierra Pacific, and I do all of our communications and workforce development, what does that mean? So I do all of our graphic design, all of our internal communications, any sort of posters or signs or anything that's printed comes through my desk. And then also I do all our social media, anything that would be like communications related are things that I do. And then the part that I enjoy even more is the workforce development part. So that would be interacting with high school students and college students and just sharing about different opportunities and careers that are available through our company. So for all you graphics kids or social media kids or communication guys that didn't know there's cool jobs available in the big picture, I'm here to tell you there are.
Great, thanks, Katie. Students who are on, one thing I would like to remind you is that you guys are welcome to interact throughout this. While it's a webinar format, the chat is open and that's available for you. Any comments or questions you may have, we are happy to answer them. We will have a question and answer section kind of at the end, where we'll be able to unmute and you guys will be able to speak directly to our host. So, but don't hesitate. As those questions pop in your head, use the chat so you don't forget them. We can always come back and get them answered for you. So, all right, Katie, would you like to introduce your team that you have with you?
Yeah, so right up first that you can see, this is Chris Roulon, and he's one of our registered foresters. And he actually is going to speak twofold. He's going to speak about forestry and our research department. And then next up is Kevin. Maybe they can wave, do a wave, Chris.
Oh yeah.
And then next up, who's excited to wave, is Kevin Roberts. He heads up. He is our lead biologist. That's right, right?
Yeah, sure.
He's the big guy. He's the big boss for all our biologists. So that's Kevin Roberts, and then very far in the back is Lynn Lindstrand, and he heads up our botany department for Sierra Pacific.
Great, thanks, Katie. And everybody, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to start with a video about Sierra Pacific and kind of introduces them as a company. So let me see here if I can do that. Okay, here we go. And please, if you cannot hear the audio, let's make sure. Can you hear?
much more protection of the environment.
I'm not hearing anything, Dana.
Yeah, the audio went out.
Oh, let's see. Thank you for. Can anybody guide me through?
See if raising your volume on your computer will do anything.
Oh,
That's
hang
happened
on.
with me a couple times.
And did you check the box when you shared to share audio?
Sound. Here, try this. No?
You can harvest timber on a commercial basis and provide for the environment and the communities. We don't want to make sawdust, we want to make lumber. And with the technology, we have dramatically increased our recovery from the logs. Today, in our sawmills, we have virtually zero waste. Everything out of the forest is used. When you deal with land, it's different. There's something that's more tangible. It's more long-term.
It was 70 years ago. We started out with $10,000 of borrowed money and a leased sawmill out in the woods. I used to think that we had a couple 100,000 acres, that'd be a lot. Well, today we've got over 2 million acres, and we're planning for 100 years from now.
Owning 2 million acres of land is a big responsibility, and we have to use the best science that's available to manage that land. From the species that are on our land, to the communities, to timberland, I'm proud of the way we operate. We operate in a lot of small communities where we're the major employer, and it is a significant responsibility. My father didn't go to college. My grandfather, I think, graduated from 8th grade. My brother, sister, and I were fortunate enough to be able to go to college, and we hope to allow that opportunity for other folks. My grandfather started the Sierra Pacific Foundation 40 years ago. It's going to be the 40th anniversary this year. We provide opportunities for some folks maybe that wouldn't have that otherwise. If you work in our company, there's a very good chance that your child can get a scholarship. We are bringing dollars into the community, and we provide over 5,000 jobs. Virtually all the companies in the West that are involved in forestry are family-owned companies. I've been extremely fortunate to be able to work with my father, my brother, and there's just a sense of family and honesty, and it goes down to the land as well. When I think about our future, I'm extremely optimistic. People are starting to understand that if we want to reduce greenhouse gases, if we're concerned about climate change, wood is the answer. We can grow more forests, sequester carbon, and we can build buildings with mass timber. We have to think further than just tomorrow. We have to look out for the future. We're guardians of the community. We're guardians for our employees and the land. I mean, the land, it's going to be here a lot longer than we are.
Excellent. I think that's just a really good overview of Sierra Pacific as a whole, as a company. So Katie, I don't know, I'm going to turn it back over to you and you can take it from here.
All right, we'll take it away. So first up, we have the very excited Chris Rulon that's going to share with you. So Chris, you want to go ahead and take the...
You want to stand at the podium?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
So I could see more of your kind face.
I know, Chris, you're really excited that I volunteered you.
I was not sure how that happened.
100% how it happened.
All right, so this is my first Zoom meeting speech, so we'll see how it goes. So I'll kind of talk about my backstory, how I got to where I am, and then I did a couple of different jobs within the company, so I was going to speak to both of those since the Dr. Cajun James wasn't able to make it, so I'll speak for her as well. Kind of talking back to when I was a kid, I didn't really know anything about natural resources. And so a friend of mine, he got me started hunting waterfowl. And so I was really into that as a 18-year-old, and then I found a class at Humboldt State that taught you about waterfowl. And that was just kind of the start of it. That was my shtick that got me going. And so I went to Humboldt State. I have an undergraduate degree in wildlife management and conservation. I graduated in 2005. And right from there, I started working at SPI. We have a project going working with fishers, which is a small mesocarnivore that's native to our forest lands here within California. And so we did a project with them. So I guess I'll backtrack. So when I joined Sierra Pacific, I was working in what we call our research and monitoring department, which is inside, it's a department within our forestry division. So it's part of the larger picture that's managing the 2 million acres that the video referred to. So when I joined that watershed, or that research and monitoring department, the first job I was doing was more of a wildlife project, but it was still pretty neat. So that we were able to use radio telemetry and track animals. And, you know, being a young kid right out of college, I was 23 or so. That was a pretty fun job. So that's one thing that you could do with a wildlife degree. But being in a watershed-based department, we inevitably had watershed research that we were doing. So we had long-term point monitoring stations within creeks throughout the ownership. And the ownership within California, which is the focus for my department, goes from Mount Shasta all the way down to Yosemite. So it's a pretty good span of ground that you're covering. And so we monitor, you know, half dozen watersheds within the ownership, and then there's even more now. So my experience in the watershed department, which is led by Dr. Cajun James. So I was doing the point studies. We were also doing in-stream gauges, temperature monitoring of the creeks. We had a big project where we were able to utilize timber harvest and science and kind of merge the two together to look at the impacts of streamside buffers on the temperatures of the creeks. Also the turbidity, which is sediment load within the creeks, we're monitoring that as well. So what else did we do? We did temperature, turbidity. We were taking water samples and we process those through the lab that we have here on site. We have a commercial oven. We take these filters with sediment. We run the water through the filter, take the sediment, and bake it. You can get the data from there as far as the sediment load within the creeks. So that was a big component. We process water samples all winter long. So you have field portions, you have lab portions. That was a pretty interesting job. Lots of ATV riding and snowmobile riding in the snow to get those water samples. So in that same department, it's pretty diverse. We have a fire weather data component. So the company is big. Wildfires is a huge deal for everybody in California, especially for a company who owns as much timberland as we do. The wildfires are devastating to what we're trying to do as a management group. So we were implementing these weather stations that record real-time data, and we take that data. When I was doing it, there was 60 stations. I think now we have probably 100, and they're scattered throughout the California ownership. And those are real, there's a tower, there's a radio, there's all these data collecting sensors and computers, and we visit those several times a year. And all that data is being sent back to our office through low-band VHF radio signals. So every night we download all the data. It goes through some algorithms that we've collaborated with some fire scientists, and we produce a forecast model that then goes out by text to all of our loggers, and they have operating restrictions based on the fire severity. So if it's just rain, then they have less restrictions. If it's really hot and dry and there's high fire risk, they have more restrictions as far as what equipment they're able to use. So that was the biggest component to the watershed, the fire weather stuff. So it's kind of interesting to where you can get with being a private industry, it's kind of nice. I have a wildlife degree, but I was able to get experience with wildlife, with watershed, with fire weather data. So I did that job for 11 years. And then from there, I transferred into a different department, which is more of a forestry department. And our forest lands within California is divided into different districts. So each district is roughly 200,000 to 250,000 acres. And so my district, there's me and 4 other registered professional foresters, which is a license that you have to earn through the state of California. And so the path to get that license, the typical path is a degree through some of the accredited schools for forestry, like Cal Poly or Humboldt State. UC Berkeley is another one. So those are the ones that come to mind right off the bat. So you get your 4-year degree, you take that degree, then you have to work under the tutorship of a registered professional forester for an additional 3 years. So you have 7 years of total experience. And then once you have that experience, you have to apply through the state to sit in to take a test. And it's an 8-hour test. It's all essay, and it takes most of the day to do that. And the pass rate is very low. I'm thinking somewhere around 40%. So it's a pretty daunting task. But there's other routes to take it. So like my route, I don't have a forestry degree, I have a wildlife degree, but they're able to prorate some of my experience with my degree, plus all the years of experience I had doing the watershed. Forestry, you have to have forestry experience, which isn't just cutting trees or being in the forest. There's different aspects of forestry. You have the plants, the wildlife, the fire weather, all that stuff. So all my experience counted. I was able to set it and take the test. Okay, so once you pass the test, you have that certificate, and then that enables you to write and sign timber harvest plan documents within the state of California. And so now my current job, I work on our Redding district, which is out of our Anderson office, and we manage about 250,000 acres, and there's me and 4 other RPFs that do that. And so it's a pretty big task. So kind of the day-to-day there is we have our annual task load. So we have different areas that we want to harvest the timber from, and it's the way we manage is based on a decade rotation. So we'll go into a watershed or a creek and harvest timber in there every 10 years, and that's our sustained yield plan. So we only go in there 10 years. So then you have your plan that you try to keep to every year, but then you have these catastrophic wildfires. So now instead of harvesting green timber, you're stuck with trying to get these emergency logs out before they go away to rot or beetles, or as they age or as they dry out, they pretty much become firewood. So you're limited to just a year or 2 to get that wood out. So then that's the other component to the job. So we have the regular green timber harvest plan, which is, we call it THP. Then you have the emergency documents. And then there's other little miscellaneous projects that we do. So the big component of logging timber is the road infrastructure. So you got to be able to get those logs from the woods to the mill. So we're big in designing and constructing roads. So part of my job is if I lay out a 20-acre unit where we're going to log the timber, I have to make sure that we can efficiently get those logs to the mill without breaking the logs, without damaging the other resources. And so if we need to build roads, we'll lay those out as needed. I'm working on a project now that is 5.5 miles of road. So we're in the process of building that. That was a big undertaking. The company has owned sections of land that don't have any road access. So there was over 1,000 acres of land that we were unable to get to. So we built a road to get in there to get those logs out. And then additional benefits to the roads will be fuel breaks to help prevent these wildfires in the future. And that's about what I've been up to this point. So now currently I'm right in the middle of writing a plan that is a fuel break only plan. Because of all these wildfires, we're really taking it on as a company to try to protect our own resource. So we're working on these plans where we'll find strategic topographic features like ridges or alongside main roads where we can cut the trees and space them out so that if fire comes through that area, it's gonna self-limit and put itself out potentially, or allow the firefighters to get in there and battle it with and be more effective. So I'm working on a plan that's 6.5 miles with fuel break. It's over 120 acres. And so I'm writing the document now. The documents, if you looked up on the website Cal Trees, that's where they house all our information. It's open to the public. You can see every harvest plan that's out there. You'll be able to see each plan that's been submitted or approved, and each one's at a different level of completion. So they're typically a pretty big document, anywhere from 200 to 300 pages of stuff that we have to add in there for protecting the resources, addressing different impacts. I think that pretty much wraps up what we're doing. Any questions out there?
I have a question for you, Chris.
Yeah, fire away.
So, do you ever, I mean, you're talking about these timber harvest plans and how everything gets taken into account, the wildlife, whoever not harvest an area because of potential endangered species or things like that?
Yeah, we'll save that information.
Okay.
I think Kevin would address that. His is going to head right down that alley. Yeah, there's definitely wildlife species that we have to protect within every plan.
Okay, excellent.
That's a great segue.
Yeah.
We can segue right to Kevin if that sounds good, Dana.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, no problem.
This is a little awkward. Hi, I'm Kevin Roberts. I'm the Wildlife Program Manager here for Sierra Pacific. I'll also start with telling a little bit of my back history, which is I graduated from Cal State University, Sacramento, with a degree in biological conservation back in 1989. From that point, I worked for 7 years in the California Department of Fish and Game, and then got hired on with another company on the coast, and then transferred to Oregon. And then 18 years ago, I took the job with Sierra Pacific Industries, and have been working here ever since. I was a district biologist for 16 of those years, and the last few years I've been here as a manager in the Anderson office. As a manager now, I have 9 full-time biologists that work for me. They graduated from San Luis Obispo, Humboldt State, UC Davis. I have a few from back east from North Carolina University, and another from James Madison. So we hire a variety of people. Most of these people have worked for the company as seasonals in the past. So as a seasonal, we tend to have about 11 9-month seasonals that come on and do a lot of work for us. And then we have another 9 interns that are summer interns while they're going to college that work for us as well. Our primary job is to know more about the wildlife that occur on company lands than anyone else. So that is a large task. The primary species that we deal with is the spotted owl, both the northern spotted owl and the California spotted owl. And we have just signed a habitat conservation plan, that's an HCP, with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for the management of both those species, both the northern and California. We also have to deal with things like bald eagles, golden eagles, northern goshawks. The fisher that Chris alluded to before is still there. We've actually we reintroduced the species back into the Sierra Nevada where it had been extirpated in the past. And that population is taking off and it's actually expanding. There's some marten work that we do. There's a bunch of camera work that we do for carnivores. So every winter we're playing with putting meat out with their baited camera stations. So the meat is there to attract the carnivores. They come in, we get the picture and we inventory all that. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. For the seasonal staff and for the biologists, I'd say the bulk of their work is working with the spotted owl, which requires surveys. So every harvest plan that Chris and other foresters put together has to be looked. We look for any occurrence of any endangered species or species of special concern or anything else that we're concerned about. We look for those species, and we do adjust, either drop the harvest unit or move the harvest unit if we can, to adjust for those species that occur there. And that's part of the habitat conservation plan for the owl. So as for the spotted owl, we'll go out and we'll survey. There's a protocol we have to follow to make sure the birds are not there. If they are there, we have protection measures that go in place. So I like to say that for myself and the biologists, we run around at night making funny noises in the woods by ourselves. And it's always a fun thing, and I don't want to.
You should give them a hoot.
No. They unfortunately made a YouTube video of me. If you look up, I don't know if it's me or if it's SPI, spotted elk calls, you'll find a crazy video of some funny guy making noises in the woods. But anyway, we do hoot for them, they hoot back, and then we document their presence and kind of move forward from there. So again, this is all part of a big plan. The foresters put together the plans, we check the plans for the wildlife occurrence, and then if all is clear, then we can go ahead and harvest. It's not like we can just go harvest. We have a lot of inspections we have to do internally before we move forward with harvesting trees. Anything else I missed? If not, good. Wait,
That's
how do
great.
you explain your plans? I'm not good at building segues.
Yeah, Dana, you have a good segue?
I know, dang.
I have a question. What kind of like tools do you use to track different species? Do you guys use drones? What kind of tech is involved?
Okay, for technology, the primary thing is right now we did a bunch of telemetry work, and telemetry is I wish I should have brought them as a little. They're small, about the size of your pinky. Devices we attach to the owls. We tail mount them, which we have to capture the owls. It's glued on. It lasts for about 1.5 years. It tracks the birds. The new technology allows us to record the location every hour. So it used to be like you got it once a week. It was good data. Now we have every hour, and that is actually improved. You can take the location every 2 minutes. We're doing prey. So we're actually following the birds, and we're actually eating, foraging, and successfully foraging for the prey items. All that data, that's new tech, if you will. We no longer have to do a VHF where you had to kind of get it directional as to where the peak was slaughtered. It actually now records a GPS point to like a 10-foot radius. The accuracy is so much better than what it was before. If we got a 4-acre area, it was good. Now we're down to 10 square feet or 100 square feet of where that bird is likely to occur. The carnivore cameras that we use for the sampling of the kind of the carnivores in the woods, those a long time ago were normal cameras, the little digital, not digital, film ones that actually you had a string attached and it would pull down on the string and push the button and take the picture. Now with motion detectors and heat sensors, those are all automatic and they can take not just one picture and have a roll of 24, but we've had places where within a week we get 5,000 pictures. Because they can do bursts and videos and all that. So we're getting a much better sample of what is occurring in our woods than we did historically. And then again, with the tags, we're working with another study group that is doing barred owls. They're tagging barred owls, and theirs are satellite linked, so they don't ever have to go in the woods to download it. It comes back to their office, so they hook it up to the bird, and then from that point forward, it's just constantly sending them back data as to where that bird is located. So we're trying to move forward with technology as it improves, but in some places it's cutting edge, and we want to be there. A lot of the data we have, I didn't say this, is we've published and co-authored over a dozen scientific papers in the last couple of years that has helped us move forward with our habitat conservation plan, has helped move the science associated with the wildlife that are occurring in the forest forward as well. It's kind of changing perspectives as to what those animals are using. So, long story, you heard me answer the question.
No, that's great. Kevin, I have another question for you. Chris had talked a little bit about the burn areas. Do you guys go in and are you surveying the wildlife, the effect of the wildlife in those areas and watching that wildlife either come back or monitoring how it is being affected by those big burns?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, the King Fire back in 2014 was one of our first kind of big fires that happened in El Dorado County. That one took out almost 100,000 acres, fast-moving fires that did 15 miles in one night. We found a lot of, I don't know how to say it, deceased wildlife. There were bear, there were deer, there were bobcats, gray fox, coyotes. they were dead all over the place. We actually found some of our spotted owls that had burnt. We found them dead as well. So that wildfire, fast moving wildfire and high intensity wildfire has an absolute negative effect on the wildlife occurring there. In general now, if it's a high intensity fire, we don't do a lot of surveys there because it's pretty much devoid of life. But we do come back in once we start reestablishing the forest and start sampling primarily with carnivore cameras again, looking to see who's moving in. We help publish papers with the spotted owl and how it responds to burn, which is if it's a high intensity fire, they do not use it. The moderate mosaic burns where you get a lot of patches of burnt and unburnt, they will stay and utilize those forests, but they won't use the high intensity. So we've done studies, published papers, and we do monitor some of the areas, but high intensity fires we kind of back out of and let us start harvesting.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
I have another question. I don't know if this is for you, but what kind of wood or what kind of trees are you working with?
There's 5, and Chris will correct me if I'm wrong, there's 5 primary species that occur, especially I'm really familiar with the Sierra Nevada: ponderosa pine, sugar pine, white fir, red fir, and incense cedar. Those are the 5 species we typically harvest. We have black oaks and tan oaks that occur. White fir, red fir. White fir, red fir, and Douglas fir. Yeah, so I missed a Douglas fir. But the oak trees, we actually manage the oak trees and try to make sure we continue to have oak trees in our forest, but we don't really use those for any wood products at this time.
That's a great segue. Trees kind of goes to botany.
That works. That works. Thank you.
And if you guys want, we'll have time at the end where you can ask all kinds of questions to any of these, specifics categories.
Perfect, because I'm making a list now.
We're not going to get up early. Good morning. My name is Lynn Lindstrand. I'm our botany program manager here at Sierra Pacific Industries. Our botany program is under kind of a larger umbrella we call our Information Services Group. So Kevin's department sits in that as well. And basically, collectively, our group's role is to provide all the information that Chris's group of foresters need to, do the work that they do. So this has actually worked out really well because Chris set the stage for the supporting groups that work under and help the forestry folks. So I'm kind of a jack of all trades biologist, and as I said, I manage our botany program, but I also work on some of our long-term planning documents and other things that just kind of help all of our forestry programs move along. As far as my background goes, I attended a local high school here in Reading and a local junior college. I attended Humboldt State University. Like Chris, my degree's in wildlife management. I also had botany and forestry while I was at Humboldt. And actually, after graduating from Humboldt, I spent 26 years in biological consulting, and then transitioned to working with our group here for going on about 3 years now. So with my botany my forestry and wildlife and fisheries background in the consulting work that I did a lot of plant work through all that time too, which kind of segued me into running a botany department here. So that's kind of where the jack of all trades kind of comes in. I have about 5 or 10 people, depending on the time of year that work under me in our botany group. And basically our primary role is to get out ahead of the areas where all of our foresters are working and conduct surveys and assessments for known or potentially occurring rare plants. And then if we find those, there's a number of things we do to document where they are, share that information with our forestry group, the ones that are working on the specific plants, and then we evaluate potential impacts and all the types of things that go into the plans that Chris was describing. Sometimes we may leave some of these areas alone because of the type of plants that we find. Other areas, the plants are okay with some disturbance, so we just do our activities as planned, kind of everything in between. So it really just depends, but it all starts with going out and seeing what you have in the first place. So it's a lot of a lot of detailed work. Botany is kind of tough because we've all gone out in the woods and seen just thousands of green things. It gets a little overwhelming a lot of times. So most of the folks that work with us, including a lot of our seasonals, have degrees, at least, if not degrees, some experience with plant taxonomy, some of the specific coursework where you get that additional detail and background. So it's a little less overwhelming to do the work. I was going to add too that and under what Kevin was saying about the firework, taking on to your question, interestingly, in contrast to a lot of the wildlife, after fires, when a lot of these plants that we chase actually do come out, there's actually a term called fire followers. So after some of these fires, we actually do quite a bit of work where opportunity provides, where we document what plants are coming back in, if any, and I'm focusing on rare ones, of course. And also with the salvage logging activities, we're evaluating whether or not those activities are how those are interacting with these plant populations as well. So interesting that the fire thing triggers kind of a whole new body of work for our group. We do occasional monitoring projects where we're just looking at the effects of plant populations and our management activities. And it's a year-round work. There's a lot of field work. It's really intensive, especially in the spring and summer, of course, during the bloom seasons. Our group works on all of our ownership here in California, and we spend a lot of time in the field. In the wintertime, it's a lot of reports, preparation, planning, things like that. But even then, you're still getting out and doing some work. I was just going to mention too, there's a lot of just as far as career planning goes, there's a lot of botany-related opportunities out there, especially lately with all these fires our state's been experiencing. There's a lot of interest in vegetation management. So there's a lot of job opportunities out there. And the other thing that kind of ties into the ag group that you folks are in is the pollinators are a big deal now too. So there's lots of botany work being done trying to deal with what's going on with some of our pollinators, trying to understand those relationships more. So I think it's there's a lot of opportunity for someone planning a career in kind of botanical and vegetation related work. It takes a lot of detail, so keep up your studies. And I'd also mention too, I mentioned field work, but there's a lot of writing involved too, at least in certain parts of our work. And that's another area to consider as you're planning your schooling, is to try to be sure that you have some writing background as well, because you've got to communicate all the results that you're out finding somehow. So it's really important. With that, I guess I can take some questions. Or
I got a question for you. Can you talk about do you have any sort of number, the amount of rare plants we found on our ownership, and then kind of talk to how that work has helped downlist some of those plants?
Yes. Yeah. Our lands are they go clear from the coast and clear down along the Sierra Nevada down into Yosemite. So we have diverse bioregions, which are coast areas, Klamath, Cascades, Sierra Nevada. So we extend to a lot of areas. Because of that, if you just looked at all the plants that occur on our lands, it's roughly about a third of California's flora. So a third of all the plants that are in the state, we have, that many. So it's that alone is a staggering number. And we, as far as special status plants go, so these are plants that have some type of regulatory rules, laws. There's a framework out there where certain things go through, species that is, go through evaluation processes, and they're determined to be, rare or uncommon, where they would warrant some protections that a normal, commonly occurring species would not get. So out of these special status species, here on our SPI lands, we have over 300 of those. And, and a smaller subset of those are actually listed and protected by the State or Federal Endangered Species Act. And a lot of our work goes into feeding information to this whole scientific body that decides whether or not something is rare or common, warrants protection. And in many cases, we provide very key information that lets decision makers know that these plants really don't warrant protections, or at least certain types of protections. And we have the information, generate the information that supports that. And that just allows people to focus on other species that may need more protections and stuff, instead of wasting time and money on things that are perfectly happy with disturbance. In fact, many of them need it in order for them to persist. So we've in just last year and a half alone, we've provided information that has resulted in re-ranking of 4 or 5 species just in the north area that were, pretty protected, and now they're still protected, but less so. If that makes any sense. So provided a lot of information for that. That's an important role. There's really not a lot of people that are out doing this. So if no one takes a proactive approach to find out how these plants interact with management activities, they're just going to sit in no man's land and be thought of as rare until someone, shows otherwise.
Have you found any unknown plants?
I have. We have one right now. In my career, I've described 3 unknown, and there's more out there. That's the other thing about botany is there's surprises. We don't know everything, and you should be up doing your work and go, what's that? And lots of times, what's that turns into something that no one's ever described before. It's pretty cool. You can name it after. You can't name it after yourself, but you can name it after Chris.
Lynn, I have a question. When kind of back to that fire areas, when an area is burned and you say that there's kind of those plants that come after those, do you guys ever do work to reestablish some of those potentially protected or, in more endangered species back into those areas, or do you just let nature take its course?
Right. We haven't done anything where we've actively tried to reestablish, but it's more documenting what's there. And nature takes care of itself in those cases. So there really is where these things are, these fires are natural anyway, and in many cases they actually help the plants persist. So no, it's not our management's not a situation where we would actively replant something if it had burned out. And really, for the species we encounter, it's really not a need.
Great, thank you.
I'm gonna open it up for the whole panel for questions.
Excellent. If any of the students have questions, I'd be happy to unmute you and you can ask your questions. So either use your raise a hand or type it into the chat room and we can answer that way. Farms coordinators, if you have any other questions. I have one that I'm sure maybe Chris could answer on. So you replant your trees once you've logged an area. Where do all those seeds come from?
So those seeds are sourced mostly from our own lands. We have certain trees that we've identified as having characteristics that we want to see in our future seedlings. So we find trees that are disease resistant, especially in like a sugar pine. It's going to have some blister rust tolerance. So we'll take those seeds and we frequently collect those ourselves. Either it's going to be a climbing crew that we hire, they'll climb and get those seeds, or sometimes we shoot the cones down with 22s to collect the cones. Yeah. Then, so once we have those seeds, there's a nursery that we take those to, and they're the ones that source most of our seedlings that come to the planting operations. So we've had some pretty, I can't speak for the whole company. I know the fires that we had here in Reading, the CAR, the HERS, and the Delta. So my district is replanting over 50,000 acres of that, and we're planting, I think, an estimated 10 million seedlings, and that's going to take us a 3-year effort. We planted over 3 million last year. When I say we, it's mostly our regeneration folks. There's a handful of people that do just that side of forestry, where I'm doing more of the prep and the environmental documents and the harvest. These folks are doing the regeneration, the planting, the thinning, the keeping the brush species at bay, and that sort of thing.
Great, thanks. We have a question from Las Plumas High School. We have all the kids on there. They want to know how many trees are harvested per day.
That would be a tough one to quantify. So some of the metrics we use in the industry would be more of a volume basis. Like, so if you look at a truckload, we measure in board feet. So if you think of one board foot is a 12 inches by 12 inches by 1 inch thick. So that's one board foot. So if you estimate one truckload is about 5,000 board feet. And I don't know how to even quantify that. You just think of one sawmill would go through a couple million board feet in a day, maybe. I don't really know. It's a tough one to quantify.
A lot.
A
right?
lot. The easiest answer, absolutely.
They also were wondering, do you offer any internships or job shadowing opportunities?
Okay.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Absolutely. In all three of the, we have interns and you can job shadow in research, in forestry, and wildlife and botany. So the interest. Typically, we already hired all of most of our interns for the year now, but the job shadowing, basically you need to make contact and try to schedule that with people. And we don't do a lot of it, but we do have potential for doing that.
Yes. So students, if you're interested in job shadowing in one of these aspects, let me know, reach out to me. You can email or let your regional coordinators know, and we can connect you with the right people and try to make those contacts for you. Another thing I was wondering is, what are you doing with all the burnt wood? Is it all this lumber that you're harvesting from these burnt areas? Is it good? Are you able to utilize it?
So a lot of times we are in those burn areas logging before the fire is out, as long as it's safe. So there'll still be stumps burning because we need to get in as fast as we can. That as soon as it burns, it starts to decay right away. The beetles will get into it. And as you're in the woods looking at where you want to log, you can hear them chewing away. So the clock is ticking as soon as that fire is done. And so from my experience, the fires we just dealt with, I'm still logging some of the burn from 2018. So we're going on 2.5 years since the burn, and some of that wood is no good. So unfortunately, we have to leave a lot of it out there, and it just becomes wildlife habitat or, large woody debris that's going to follow the forest floor. So we can't use it. But right away, that wood is commercially valuable, so it's got a lot of value to it.
question here. Has any of the fires affected any SPI land? Like adjacent, or I don't know, or are there potential threats where it can possibly in the future?
Yeah,
you're good.
So yeah, we had, in my area, we have the fires in Reading, burn a significant portion. We had, if I think in recent years, all of our districts that manage lands throughout California at least have had large catastrophic fires that burn up portions of the land. The ownership that we have in Washington is less so because of the climate there. It's more west side Washington where there's a lot of water, but anything in California is at risk every year. So it's a huge priority for us to try to prevent that. So we institute some real strict restrictions on the loggers when they're working during the fire season.
Perfect. I have one last question for you. When you are in, and you talked about that you are working on a timber harvest plan and you go in and select a certain amount of acres that you're going to harvest, do you harvest every tree in that area that is of the type of lumber that you're looking for, or do you leave some in that area?
So kind of looking at the long-term management, we have a decade rotation, right? So every year we go into one watershed. And California has divided the state up into watersheds that are roughly 10,000 acres each. They pick it, it's kind of a geographical unit. And so each of those watersheds will enter once every 10 years. So once we go in and we identify where we want to harvest, we are doing a clear cut style logging where we go in and we cut every tree. Well, there's definitely exceptions to that because we've entered into agreements, both the HCP and or the Fisher CCAA, where we have agreed to leave certain elements that are found to be important to wildlife. So we have, if we have a 20-acre unit, we're required to leave 2% of the 20 acres behind. We also leave every legacy tree, which is, we have definitions for each of these. So legacy tree or a wildlife tree that have important characteristics to wildlife tend to be the larger hardwood trees, the oaks, or large non-merchantable green conifers we'll leave behind as well. And then also we have to leave some sort of element, which is a tree, a snag, a retention area every 300 feet so Fisher has a place to escape. So there's various elements that we do retain within our clear cuts now, so they're not, technically a full-on clear cut.
Yeah, those areas that we leave out were actually, wasn't just like we just decided to do that or requested to do that. We had science and research that led us to creating those areas of the 2% clumps and the dispersed trees. There's science behind that that says that that's what those wildlife will use in the future. So it's a process of everybody working together to get those to that point.
Excellent. That's awesome. All right. Well, I know we're kind of coming up on our hour. Does anybody else have any other questions for any of our panelists today? Otherwise, if we don't, we can let you all go. And again, thank you so much for sharing about all. Yes, Letty, go ahead.
Oh, I just had a question. So from my perspective, forestry is very much male dominated. And I was wondering, like, how do you engage young women that might be interested in joining or looking into this career field in the future? Maybe Katie.
We have a number of our biologists are female, and about half of our seasonal staff. So it is a dynamic that is actually changing because there's more women entering the field of wildlife, especially as it relates to forestry. And we don't, I mean, if we just look for qualifications, and if the people are qualified, that they get that job, and they get it. In terms of the stuff that's going on in schools, I think is it called STEM, that kind of stuff that's really kind of targeting those kind of people that are actually introducing them to science, which is what we're looking for hiring for our wildlife side of things. That's helping to create more people, or a variety of people in that field.
And then I'd say, oh, sorry.
I was just, I to add what Kevin's saying, that's definitely the case. There's many more of our new foresters. There's a lot of women that have come up through, and Bobby is hilarious because it's female dominated, and it's been that way for a long time. Those opportunities are certainly there, and I think that the NR fields in general are definitely seeing change like that, across all types of natural resources.
And I was just going to add on that we actually, a couple of us ladies that do work for SBI are a part of Women in Timber, which is a ladies group. I don't know if you have a Women in Timber chapter in your area, but they're focused on getting out and sharing about these careers and opportunities within, the timber industry. So.
Great question, Letty. Yeah, and I think I obviously have had a little more experience with the community of Sierra Pacific. And I don't know if anybody really has an interest in, learning more about that. I know speaking with many of these, there's also another really good YouTube video and that I can share. It kind of is a little longer and talks a little more about the community that the company has. And I think they just really have a unique one that they're much more family oriented, and it being a family owned generational company really shines through in most of their employees too. So yeah, again, with that, I think, we can probably wrap up with our hour, and I really appreciate it. I appreciate you guys taking your time and sharing your knowledge. If anybody has any questions about careers or looking for those job shadows or future internships, again, a lot of their internships are posted on their website, but I'm here to answer any questions and make those connections for any of you that might have any interest in that. So with that, again, thank you, and we will continue to be in touch.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.